This is the Pavo 25 V2 from Beta FPV. It's a 2.5-inch Cinewhoop that's small enough to fly indoors, but powerful enough to carry a GoPro. And if you're looking for one Cinewhoop that can do it all, keep watching because you're going to want to have a look at this one. What makes the V2 of the Pavo 25 stand out from other Cinewhoops is the combination of larger motors and ducts that are functional, not just prop guards. What that means is that the Pavo 25 has enough power and thrust to carry a GoPro, but it's still efficient enough to get long flight times and small enough to fly indoors. This one comes without a VTX, which means that you can add the VTX of your choice and you're getting a pre-tuned, pre-built drone at a price that's much lower than most digital bind and flies. It's just enough do-it-yourself to save a little bit of money, but you don't have to do any soldering or tuning if you don't want to. Now, I did purchase this drone. This is not a review sample, and in this video I'm going to let you know why I went with the Pavo 25 V2 over some of the other options that are out there. I'm going to show you guys some flight footage and give you my opinions on how this thing flies with and without a GoPro. I'll show you how to install the DJI-O3 and give you some tips on how to get this thing set up and in the air. And I'll give you guys the information that you need to decide whether or not this Cinewhoop is for you. As always, there will be timestamps in the video description below, so feel free to skip ahead if you're looking for some specific information. And please do subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment. It really helps me out. All right, let's get into it. And here's what you get in the box. An extra set of props, an LED light strip, a hardware bag with the FPV camera mount, the GoPro mount, and some screws, a cable for your digital VTX, and some instructions and a support card. And finally, the drone itself. Feels super solid in the hands. It feels great. I like the way these ducts feel. The carbon looks really nice, nicely finished, nice and smooth. Can't wait to get my VTX in here and give you guys a closer look. The feature that really sold me on this drone over some of the other options out there are these 1505 4600 kV motors combined with these ducts. The larger, higher kV motors provide more power than we're used to having on typical 2.5-inch Cinewhoops. And unlike most other Cinewhoops on the market right now, these ducts are actually functional. They're not just prop guards. Now, Beta FPV says that this combination provides around 200 grams of thrust. I don't have any way of testing that number, but when I fly the Pavo 25 V2, I can feel the extra power, especially when I'm carrying an external camera, yet I'm still getting some nice long flight times. So I see that they do add some extra efficiency. Beta FPV recommends using 650 to 850 milliamp 4S batteries to get between 6 and 8 minutes of flight time. I'm getting more like 4 to 6 minutes of flight time on these 650 and 850 LiPos that I have, but keep in mind these are older batteries. With newer batteries like Beta FPV's Lava LiPos, you'll probably get closer to those numbers. Running a DJI-O3, the Pavo 25 V2 weighs in at 191.5 grams. To put that in perspective, the Pavo 25 V1 weighs in at about 160 grams. It is running a Caddx Vista with a Polar Micro camera, which is a lighter weight VTX. With the 4S 650 battery, it weighs in at 278.8 grams, so it is over 250. With the 4S 850, it weighs in at 293 grams. Now, if we add a GoPro Bones, it weighs in at 356 grams. And if we add a GoPro 11 Mini, it weighs in at 425 grams. The Pavo 25 V2 is on the heavy side, but it feels super solid in the hands. This top carbon plate is 2.5 millimeters thick, and it's perfectly smooth. There's some nice round cutouts. There's no sharp edges. The Pavo 25 uses the same aluminum standoffs and aluminum finishings that we see on the Pavo 35, and this is another nice upgrade from the V1 because on the V1 these battery strap mounts were 3D printed and I did break mine in a crash. The camera plate is soft mounted to isolate both your FPV camera and your action camera from vibrations. The GoPro mount and the camera mount are both molded plastic, and I appreciate that because these mounts are a little bit more durable. With TPU action camera mounts, there's always a danger of the screws pulling through the soft material in a crash, and you don't want your expensive GoPro to go flying. The Pavo 35 used the same vibration isolation system, and it worked great for keeping the vibrations and jello out of your onboard DVR footage. The Pavo 25 is using Beta FPV's F722 35 amp all-in-one board. This is the same board that they're using in the Pavo 35, which means it has more than enough power for this 2.5-inch Cinewhoop. And it has 6 UARTs available, so it's really easy to install a GPS or anything else that you might want. It also has a plug for your digital VTX, making it super simple to install your DJI O3 or whatever VTX you want to use. There is no GPS option with the Pavo 25. That's not a surprise because this is a micro Cinewhoop, and I only mention it because the Cinelog 25 does offer an option with GPS. I am running Crossfire on mine. You can see the Beta FPV 915 megahertz antenna back here, and the Crossfire receiver is installed in another molded plastic part. It's nice and secure, but you can still access the bind button. I think ELRS is going to be the best option for most people who want to save a little bit of money, but what can I say? I'm still running Crossfire. I love the peace of mind I get knowing I can take full advantage of that amazing range and penetration of the O3 without having to worry about fail-safes. The DJI O3 is held in there super securely, and maybe it's even too secure because you don't have access to the SD card slot or the USB port on the O3. The Pavo 35 also didn't have access to the SD card slot, but I overlooked that because you did have access to the USB port, and you can just access your SD card over USB, basically using the O3 as an SD card reader. With the Pavo 25 V2, you don't have access to either the SD card slot or the USB port on the DJI O3, and that's a real problem, and it does represent a drawback of this drone. I really wish Beta FPV had addressed this problem by providing something like this in the box. These are all specialized USB cables or USB extensions designed to solve this problem on different drones. This is a USB extension cable that came with my Quav Pro Nano, and it's designed to be able to plug into that DJI O3 with really limited space. This is a USB extension cable from Diatone, and this is probably the solution I'm going to use by plugging this end into the DJI O3 and then mounting this end onto the frame somewhere so I can plug in USB. Installing the included LED light strip is super simple because Beta FPV has provided us with a cable already soldered to the flight controller, which is already set up in Betaflight. Just make sure to route that cable through your standoff so it doesn't get chopped up in the props. Installing the DJI O3 is pretty straightforward, but you do need to take your time because cable management is critical. There's not a lot of space between the props and those cables. You'll want to remove the plastic ducts from the frame in order to route your cables through these standoffs. Mine was fairly difficult to get off actually because the plastic ducts were really jammed into those standoffs, and I had to work them free side to side with a little bit of patience because it would be easy to break these plastic ducts. I did remove the standoffs from the frame in order to route the camera cable and the antennas inside each of the standoffs to keep them away from the props. I also zip tied the camera cable to the top of the frame just to make sure it wouldn't fall into the props because there's really not that much clearance. I was careful to leave enough slack so that no vibrations would be transferred to the camera through a tight cable. This gives me a little bit of extra peace of mind knowing my camera cable's safe. Reassembling the drone was actually a little bit tricky. I had to place the air unit where it goes because the cables were already routed. Then I installed the prop guard, and then I installed the carbon plate to hold it all together. Here's a tip, you guys. Do not forget to insert your SD card into the DJI-O3 before you put your drone back together, like I did. Otherwise, you'll have to take your DJI-O3 out again in order to put the SD card in. The bad news, like I mentioned, is that you don't have easy access to that SD card slot or the USB port. But the good news is, it's not a big deal to loosen these 4 screws, and then the DJI-O3 will just pop right out. All right, you guys, now I'm going to show you some flight footage. I'm going to show you guys 3 sample flights, which I think represent 3 pretty good use cases for this drone. I do need to emphasize that my batteries are super old. You will definitely get longer flight times if you're using newer LiPos. My first flight is with a GoPro Mini, and I was surprised at how well the Pavo 25 V2 did with the weight of the GoPro Mini, because I got around 4 minutes. The GoPro Mini weighs in about 135 grams, and you might argue that that's way too much weight for a 2.5-inch drone, and you might be right that flying this much weight on 2.5-inch props is not ideal, but it can be done, and it doesn't fly terribly. It's absolutely a viable solution if you have to get some indoor shots and you don't own any other equipment. And that's why I say the Pavo 25 V2 is a great all-in-one Cinewhoop. One thing is having the ideal equipment for a given job, and another thing is the equipment you already own or the equipment that you can actually afford. With that said, you will be much better off flying the Pavo 25 V2 with a lighter camera if you have access to one, or if you have to fly a full GoPro, consider the Pavo 35, which is an absolute ripper and will handle that weight with better performance and give you longer flight times. I got pretty close to 4 minutes with a full GoPro in this flight. My next flight is with the GoPro Bones, and as you're about to see, I got over 4.5 minutes, about 4 minutes 40 seconds of flying time with this camera. I love flying the GoPro Bones because you get all that GoPro 10 and Real Steady goodness in a super lightweight package. It's sort of the best of both worlds for FPV pilots. The only thing I dislike about my Bones is the power solution. I don't mind connecting up a BEC to my battery balance cable, and I'm super careful to only power my Bones with a BEC because I've heard of them getting burnt out before. But those tiny little plugs on the camera end are so weak and flimsy that you can lose a shot if the plug fails and your camera powers off. A naked camera or an Insta360 Go would also work well on the Pavo 25 V2, but personally, I don't really like the image quality I see from the Insta360 Go cameras, and I prefer my Bones to nakedizing a GoPro. Naked GoPros are a little bit finicky for me. I understand that for certain professional niches they're indispensable, but they're not for me. Of the 3 flights I'm going to show you today, this one is probably closest to my personal preference for doing professional video work. You're getting excellent and reliable image quality while still keeping things lightweight with long flight times running the GoPro Bones on the Pavo 25 V2. My final flight is without an external camera, which means I'm just recording with the DJI-O3. If you plan on flying an O3 with your Pavo 25, using the O3 as your HD camera is going to give you a massive advantage because you won't have the weight or the hassle or the expense of an external camera, so your drone will fly much better and much longer. That high quality 4K 60 DVR footage is what the O3 is all about, and it's good enough for most people, and it's even usable for professional work if the lighting conditions are good. I easily got over 5.5 minutes on my used and abused old LiPo batteries. And so 6 and 7 minutes should be possible with new batteries, and you might even see as much as 8 minutes if you're using high voltage LiPos. There is a lot to like about the Pavo 25 V2, but it's not perfect. I love the power system on this drone. You have a modern F722 all-in-one board, beefy ESCs for the size, larger 1505 motors to lift heavy cameras, and functional ducts to keep things efficient and provide some nice long flight times. I am a little bit annoyed by the lack of access to the USB port or the SD card on the DJI-O3, but you can solve that by installing a USB extension cable or you can just accept that you need to take out 4 screws and pop out the air unit every time you want to get the footage off your drone. All right, you guys, I'll sum up my thoughts on this drone by saying, if you can only afford one drone, or if you need a Cinewhoop that can fly indoors and around people, and can also fly outdoors and handle a full GoPro, the Pavo 25 V2 is a pretty good option. It's not perfect, but it's probably one of the best 2.5-inch Cinewhoops out right now. All right, you guys, that's it for this one. Please make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you back here for the next one. Thanks for watching.